everybody, and welcome back to PulpCast 3.0. I am your host, Josh Adams. So, the original podcast has been off the air for about 3 years now, but we're back here on YouTube in a brand new format. As a side note, stay tuned in the coming weeks for additional PulpCast content from our other hosts and alumni from the original podcast, and feel free to join the conversation over on facebook.com/pulpcast.net. So, comic book to film fans have been drooling in anticipation since it was announced last year that Disney was actively pursuing the purchase of Fox Studios. A dream that was originally proclaimed to be too good to be true is now apparently all but certain. On Friday, July 27th, Fox shareholders voted overwhelmingly to approve the Disney deal, and the FCC has already given a preliminary approval based on Disney shedding a portion of Fox's assets. But let's be honest, in our wheelhouse, no one likely cares about those details. Instead, what they do care about, and are clawing at the seams to figure out, is when and how we will see those Marvel properties that Fox has held for so long be incorporated into the Marvel Disney MCU proper. Characters like Wolverine and Deadpool, teams like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and a plethora of other characters and language within those stables will officially be back home and lining up for an appearance in the MCU. So the big question is, where does Marvel Studios start? When previously asked what his plans for those assets are in a larger narrative, Disney Marvel producer Kevin Feige has been relatively coy, saying that he's dreamed about it, but not made any active plans. I get where Feige is coming from diplomatically in his answer to the press here, but that not making plans part doesn't seem likely from a business standpoint. These films and their larger overarching narrative are generally in the works years ahead of time, and as such, it would make more sense that there are at the very least some contingency scripts or story ideas related to implementing these characters, especially any new big bads such as Onslaught, Sinister, or Galactus, who would help strengthen an area that Marvel has repeatedly taken flack for in the form of underdeveloped antagonists.
That's just lazy writing.
Having those Fox properties available right around the corner, I would be surprised if Feige and his team didn't already have plans A through Z ready to go. Another big question looming is how to incorporate those characters. Is the Fox Marvel universe as we know it, actors like James McAvoy and Ryan Reynolds, are they folded into the MCU proper, or does Disney's Marvel Studios recast the entire Fox universe as a whole in the process of incorporating it? So there are pros and cons to this situation, and as we'll explain here, there's really two ways to look at it. First off, there's the fresh start perspective. It makes sense to recast the X-Men and even Wolverine because fans are already mentally prepared for that change. X-Men Apocalypse was in a lot of ways the death nail for the Fox X-Men universe, and showed that even the reboot and recasting only provided so much as far as fan loyalty, which is really divided on the topic. And with Hugh Jackman officially departing from the role of Logan, it's really a big question as to how Disney handles the X-Men going forward.
It's funny that I only ever see two of you. It's almost like the studio couldn't afford another X-Men.
The Fantastic Four is pretty much a swing in the opposite direction, as almost no one alive wants to see any of those characters as portrayed by the actors in the 2015 film return. It has almost nothing to do with the actors' performances, though I'm sure I'll take some flack in the comments for saying that, but instead the fact that Josh Trank's Fantastic Four reboot left an overall bad taste in everyone's mouths, from the way it was scripted, shot, and implemented, as well as the social media backlash towards the film. The general opinion is that Disney should recreate Marvel's first family from scratch. Deadpool, however, is an entirely different story. Ryan Reynolds has so perfectly encapsulated the character that it would be business suicide for Disney to try to recast anyone else in that role. Not to mention, you would have a fan base revolt, the likes of which Disney has never seen, and yes, I'm including The Last Jedi in that. Kevin Feige's comments about the merger are a little dated to be sure, but if you're looking for a more recent update, then those pointing to a whole and complete transition without reboots would look to comments very recently by Disney CEO Bob Iger, who, when asked by Matt Bellani of The Hollywood Reporter about how Marvel is going to absorb Fox's X-Men franchise and whether Kevin Feige is going to oversee everything, he replied, quote, I think it only makes sense. I want to be careful here because of what's been communicated to the Fox folks, but I think they know. It only makes sense for Marvel to be supervised by one entity. There shouldn't be two Marvels, end quote. I underline this part for my own influence because it's interesting the wording that Bob Iger chooses here. Has the Fox Marvel team been promised a certain amount of anonymity and freedom once they're incorporated into the MCU? Will the existing casts and production teams of the X-Men, Deadpool, and the Fantastic Four be allowed to remain intact and whole? Mr. Iger's comment is open to a certain amount of interpretation, and it's possible I might be reading too much into this. But based on this alone, it's also entirely possible that the Fox Marvel production teams may not have to reboot or recast those franchises at all. Well, except for the Fantastic Four. So can we all just agree to Control-Alt-Delete that whole thing?
Yeah. We're good.
Some fans have even commented that this is the perfect time to implement those characters, since whatever happens after Avengers 4 will be a decidedly different MCU than the one that we have come to know, and as such, a perfect time to merge worlds or introduce characters as if they have been there all along, or moved into it organically. We know that there are some aspects of time and interdimensional travel involved in Avengers 4 from set photos that have leaked, and this may well be a possibility that we will see one or more Fox characters introduced in some way in the movies just down the road. Disney has also always used post-credit scenes to introduce characters and narrative twists during its 10-plus year run, and it's likely that whether it's immediate or further down the road, this is how and where we will see the first Fox characters introduced. Disney has also left itself quite a few plot lines and story devices open in order to make this happen. For instance, let's not forget that during the events of Spider-Man Homecoming, Avengers Tower, a major set piece for several films so far, was sold and vacated, which strikes me as a perfect place for the Baxter Building to be incorporated into the New York City MCU skyline. So, does Disney pick and choose, or do they wipe the slate clean? Or do they try to make what they have right now work in some fashion when incorporating Fox's Marvel assets into the larger MCU, as Disney CEO Bob Iger's comments seem to suggest? When is the best time to introduce those characters, and what are the best crossover stories from the comics universe to pull from in order to do that? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, if you like what you see and you want to stay tuned to PulpCast, then hit the subscribe button. We'll see you next time.